Living organisms. These are the organisms that are capable of growth, sensitivity, movement, nutrition, respiration, reproduction, and excretion. They include large complex organisms such as elephants and simple microscopic organisms such as bacteria. But how can we classify living organisms to better understand how closely related certain living organisms are?
Good day and welcome to science class.
Today's lesson is on classification of living organisms. First, let's look at the contributions that were done to the classification of living organisms. The first person who attempted to classify living organisms is Aristotle. He was a Greek philosopher and he simply classified living organisms as plants or animals. Next, we have Carolus Linnaeus, who was a Swedish botanist and is known as the father of taxonomy because he contributed to classification of living organisms in two major ways. Firstly, he created a classification system where he grouped organisms in 7 levels: kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Kingdom is the most inclusive level, and species is the most specific level, and the organisms that belong to the same species are the most closely related. Let's take a look at how human beings are classified according to this system. They belong to the kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Mammalia, order Primates, family Hominidae, genus Homo, and species Sapiens. He also created a scientific naming system called the binomial nomenclature, which uses genus and species names of organisms. The genus name is capitalized and species name is in lowercase, and it has to be written in italics or underlined. For humans, the scientific name will be Homo sapiens. This classification system is based on shared features such as the anatomy of organisms, their nutrition. Organisms that produce their own food are known as autotrophic, and organisms that consume other living organisms for food are known as heterotrophic. It's also based on cell structure. We have eukaryotic or prokaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells have membrane-bound organelles, such as a nucleus, in which their DNA is stored. Prokaryotic cells do not have membrane-bound organelles, and their DNA is not stored within a nucleus. Organisms are also classified based on whether they are unicellular or multicellular. Unicellular organisms consist of one cell, and multicellular organisms consist of multiple cells. Let's look at the 5 kingdoms that were proposed by R.H. Whitaker in 1955. So living organisms were classified based on whether they were prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Prokaryotic organisms were classified under the kingdom Monera, and the eukaryotic organisms were further classified based on whether they were unicellular or multicellular. Unicellular organisms were placed under the kingdom Protista, and the multicellular organisms were further classified based on their cell walls. If the organism has no cell wall, they were placed under the kingdom Animalia, and the organisms that had cell walls present were further classified based on whether they were autotrophic or heterotrophic. Autotrophic organisms were placed under the kingdom Plantae, and heterotrophic organisms were placed under the kingdom Fungi. So how do we classify living organisms today? We majorly use the classification system proposed by Carolus Linnaeus, but we've added the domain level. The domains are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. The organisms that belong to the domain bacteria are placed under the kingdom Eubacteria. The organisms that belong to the domain archaea are placed under the kingdom Archaebacteria, and the organisms that belong to the domain Eukarya are classified under the kingdoms Protista, kingdom Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. So in order to remember the order of the classification system, you can use the sentence, did King Philip come over for great spaghetti? And using the first letter of each word will help you remember that the order is domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So let's look at how a dichotomous key can help us classify living organisms. A dichotomous key is a scientific tool used to identify and classify organisms based on their characteristic. It consists of a series of choices based on contrasting features that leads to two possible outcomes at each step. So let's use this dichotomous key to identify these arthropods. Starting off with arthropod A. And starting at step 1, are wings present or absent? This arthropod has wings, so we need to move on to step 2. Step 2, does the arthropod have one pair of wings or two pairs of wings? A has one pair of wings, so we conclude that it is a musca. Moving on to B, and starting again at step 1. Are wings present or absent? B has no wings, so we need to move on to step 3. Step 3, does it have legs present on most of the body or legs on front part of the body only? So it has legs on most of the body, so we need to move on to step 4. Step 4 asks whether the legs are all similar or if the legs have different types. We can see that the legs on the top are different from the legs on the bottom. So we conclude that organism B is a leander. C, starting again step 1, are wings present or absent? Wings are absent, so we move on to step 3. Step 3, are legs present on most of the body or only on the front of the body? We can see that organism C only has legs on the front or the top part of its body. So we need to move on to step 5. Step 5 asks if the organism has 3 pairs of legs or 4 pairs of legs. So counting the legs, 1, 2, 3. It has 3 pairs of legs, meaning that it is a pediculus. Moving on to D. And starting again at step 1, are there wings present or absent? Wings are absent, so we move on to step 3. Are the legs present on most of the body or only on the front of the body? The legs are only at the top of the body, so we need to move on to step 5. Step 5 asks if they have 3 pairs of legs or 4 pairs of legs. This organism has 4 pairs of legs, meaning that it is an Arrhenius. Organism E, and starting again at step 1, does the organism have wings present or absent? This organism does not have wings, so we move on to step 3. Are the legs present on most of the body or only on the front part of the body? It's on most of the body, so we move on to step 4. Step 4 asks if the legs are all similar or different. The legs are all similar, so E is a lithobius. And then finally, the last organism, F, step 1, are there wings present or absent? Wings are present, so we move on to step 2. 1 pair of wings or 2 pair of wings. This organism has 2 pair of wings, so it is a libellula. And with that, we've come to the end of our lesson. Please find practice questions and answers in the link in the description box, and thank you for watching.